Welcome back, everyone. My name is Aaron, and this is the Law of One series, episode 7. Now, it's safe to say that the Law of One series is easily the most popular on my channel. And because of that, I get a lot of Law of One related questions, even on videos that have nothing to do with it. And one of the questions that I get asked most often is, who is Ra? How do we know we can trust what Ra has to say? How do we know that Ra is not here to deceive us? And although these questions are clearly coming from people who probably haven't read the Law of One, I felt like it might still be appropriate to make a video discussing who Ra is and what their purpose is in relation to our planetary evolution. So the first thing you typically notice when reading the Law of One is that Ra begins each transmission by saying, "I am Ra." And this might seem weird to you and I, who would never speak to someone like this, but we have to remember that Ra is only using the English language to speak to us. But Ra does not use verbal language natively. Higher density beings speak through what is called NVC, which stands for nonverbal communication, or telepathy if you prefer that term. And the way that this communication works is that if one being is to communicate with another, they first begin by presenting their native vibration to that being to let them know who is speaking, a lot like the caller ID on your iPhone. And this again is not verbal, but an energetic impression that is sent. And this allows the sender and receiver to sort of link consciousness for instant communication of ideas and feelings and images. And so in a trance state, the way that this energetic introduction comes across in verbal language is, "I am Ra." So Carla connects with this vibration before each transmission to sort of allow Ra to communicate information directly into her consciousness. But throughout the text, Ra does have some difficulty explaining such complex ideas through such a weak and limited medium as the human language. But with that being said, the information that Ra is able to share in the Law of One is truly astounding. So let's take a closer look at the information that Ra shares about themselves in the Law of One material. Ra is a social memory complex of 6th density, which originated on the planet Venus. A social memory complex is essentially a planetary consciousness of an entire civilization. It is a phenomenon that usually occurs in the middle of 4th density. The evolution of consciousness follows a very distinct pattern. The Creator's consciousness is singular and unified, but it splits itself off into infinite varieties of individual fragments which appear to be separate. This allows the Creator to slowly evolve back towards itself so it can experience what it is like from a finite point of view. This evolution is pulled by the gravity of love, which is the essence of the Creator, and this is why the phenomenon of social memory complexes occurs in the 4th density. At our current stage, consciousness appears to be separate, but using marriage as an example, couples that are truly in love and spend long periods of their lives together begin to merge with one another and take on the characteristics, thinking patterns, and behaviors of their partner. This is a small example of what begins to happen in 4th density. At some stage of evolution, consciousness begins to evolve telepathic communication. This renders verbal language obsolete, as thoughts can now be shared directly between entities. Eventually, the gravity of love between two beings becomes so strong that the desire to no longer exist in separate states is born. They begin to share all memories and knowledge with one another. As this process of entities telepathically merging continues, eventually all beings merge into one singular consciousness. This is why Ra refers to it as a social memory complex, because it is a complex of all the memories of every soul within the group being universally shared. A social memory complex is an important stage in the evolution of the Creator merging back into itself. This is because the individual mind-body-spirit complex can only evolve so far by itself, and at some point, joining with others is necessary in order to keep polarizing through the densities. In session 45, Ra states, "The basic purpose of a social memory complex is that of evolution. Beyond a certain point, the evolution of spirit is quite dependent upon the understanding of self and other self as creator. This constitutes the basis for social complexes. When brought to maturity, they become social memory complexes. So a social memory complex does not mean that all individuality vanishes, but simply that all beings of that complex share one mind. So all knowledge in the group is equally available. So there might be billions of different souls from Ra's social memory complex incarnate on different planets at any given time, but each one of them may effectively represent themselves as Ra and speak for the entire group in any situation. Because at this level, there is no true distinction any longer between other selves, as all are seen as simply different expressions of the same creator. So at some point in our fourth density cycle, Earth will also become a unified planetary consciousness. And although we did just reach a fourth density vibration about a decade ago, Ra states that the average fourth density cycle is about 30 million years. So needless to say, we have a pretty long time to go before we get there. But since the invention of the internet, our planet has become remarkably more unified, as we're now able to see and speak with and relate to people all around the world, and begin to gain the understanding that we are truly all the same. And this is the very beginning stage of our planetary consciousness becoming unified. This is a critical step in our evolution towards fourth density love, which is also the density of service to others. Ra explains that the third density is primarily about achieving enlightenment of the self through understanding the laws of consciousness, which Ra calls becoming balanced or crystallized. But in the fourth density, the primary path to polarization is through service to others, and there's very little work done in consciousness in the fourth density. So in session 48, Ra states, "The work that is accomplished in positive fourth is that work whereby the positive social memory complex, having through slow stages harmoniously integrated itself, goes forth to aid those of less positive orientation which seek for their aid. Thus their service is their work, and through this dynamic between the societal self and the other self, which is the object of love, greater and greater intensities of understanding or compassion are gained. This intensity continues until the appropriate intensity of light may be welcomed. This is the fourth density harvest." Ra says that during the integration of sharing all memories with the group, there is some catalyst of self-growth required in this, but the greatest amount of work is done by serving others who are less polarized. This service to others is extremely heavy in fourth density, comes to a halt in the fifth density, and begins again in the sixth density. And this brings us to Ra's visitation of ancient Egypt 11,000 years ago. Ancient Egypt is easily the most mysterious and intriguing culture in all of human history for a variety of reasons. They seem to have a much deeper understanding of science, mathematics, and astronomy than should have been possible at their time. Nothing is more mysterious, however, than the Great Pyramids of Giza. The Pyramids of Giza are so impeccably constructed that if even one of the base stones of the pyramid was misaligned by a centimeter, the entire pyramid would corkscrew out of alignment. There are hundreds of granite beams inside the pyramid that weigh 70 tons each, that are placed over 300 feet above the ground. The tools required to pull off such a feat were not only unavailable in those times, but still do not exist today. Even with all our technology and machinery, we are still not capable of making an exact replica of the Giza pyramids today. This is because each limestone block of the pyramid weighs between 2 and 30 tons, and there are an estimated 2.3 million of these stones. Not to mention that the closest limestone quarry where the pyramids were built is about 500 miles away. How the ancient Egyptians could have transported such enormously heavy stones that far and then placed them over 400 feet in the air with perfect mathematical accuracy is a complete mystery to scientists today. Not only is it a mystery, there isn't even one plausible explanation how this could have been possible. Because of this, there have been many theories posited that it must have been constructed by alien intelligence which visited Earth long ago. And this is where the parallels with the raw material get very interesting. Raw civilization evolved on the planet Venus a billion or so years in the past, and according to Ra, they had a very harmonious and rapid evolution through fourth density. Recent studies from September 2019 concluded that Venus likely had surface water and habitable conditions for life around 3 billion years, and they may have been in this condition up until 700 million years ago. This timetable lines up perfectly with the information that Ra gives about their social memory complex in the Law of One material. Venus is now a 6th density planet, but is no longer habitable to physical life in this dimension. However, Ra states that most of their complex still dwells on Venus in the 5th and 6th dimensions. So Ra's memory complex visited Egypt 11,000 years ago in an attempt to dictate the Law of One and aid in the evolution of Earth's planetary consciousness. Ra explains that this was not a violation of free will because the Egyptian people at the time were highly pantheistic and believed that gods visited Earth at various times. They also worshipped the sun as a god, so Ra's group found this very harmonious with the Law of One and therefore not a violation of their free will. And so when Ra's people visited Egypt, they were appropriately named by the Egyptians as Ra, the sun god. This is essentially the answer to the Fermi paradox of why we don't see extraterrestrials if they exist. In the same way that we monitor our own wildlife from a distance and seek to preserve their natural habitat, planet Earth is monitored by many social memory complexes from a distance in this way. Ra explains that there is a hierarchy of higher density beings that quarantine the Earth to protect its natural evolution. There's an extreme level of honor paid to the law of free will by higher density positive beings. This is seen as the first and primary distortion of the Law of One. The Creator wants to have an organic experience without infringement, and even we third density humans also honor this unspoken law of the universe in many ways. To those who actually care for wildlife, it is studied from a distance with great caution taken not to disturb the natural habitat. Our scientists don't go running into the middle of a herd of zebras in order to study them. And likewise, higher density beings are not going to land on the front lawn of the White House and introduce themselves to us openly. Presently, our civilization is in a state of extreme arrogance that we basically know all there is to know about the mysteries of the universe, and nothing too far outside of our current scope could possibly exist. Alien civilizations will not violate this belief unless we change it. There's a certain stage of intelligence that must be reached for any planet to be contacted by outside intelligence. So until Earth reaches a collective consensus that we are not alone on this planet, we will not see it, because honoring free will is of primary importance to higher density beings. However, Ra states that there is an increasing number of UFOs allowing themselves to be seen by us as we evolve, to open us to the mysterious and expand our awareness of things beyond our understanding. We see this happening increasingly often right now, as our own military pilots are coming out to say that they observe UFOs quite regularly during patrols and simulations. Our own government has also finally declassified hundreds of UFO encounters which were previously classified and kept from public knowledge. This is a testament to the way that higher density beings operate when trying to be of service to third density civilizations. They will not force anything on us, but they will give us helpful clues and opportunities to expand our awareness of reality. Although Egypt deeply believed in the unity and mystery of creation, the peoples of Egypt could not adequately understand Ra's form of communication and grew confused at the teachings. So Ra's people left and returned again 2,500 years later. Ra states that they appeared in the skies in bell-shaped craft, and after some time, they began to walk among the people in the form of a tall yet fragile-looking light body, which they felt most closely resembled their essence. There is a large amount of ancient hieroglyphics that seem to show bell-shaped crafts in the air, and long, lanky humanoid figures with large heads. Egyptologists have no understanding of what these images mean, but their correlation to the raw material is very intriguing. Ra states that the pyramids were constructed around 6,000 years ago. For decades, Egyptologists have theorized that these pyramids were used as tombs for pharaohs, although there is not a single piece of evidence to support this claim. The pyramids are built with large chambers inside, and a long, narrow opening near the top. Some Egyptologists hypothesize that this was used to view small portions of the night sky for astronomy. The real purpose of the pyramids is a complete mystery, along with how they were constructed at all. Ra explains that the pyramids were built as healing centers for the mind, body, and spirit. Ra attempted to teach the Egyptians how to perform physical healing using crystals, which can only be done by a crystallized entity without any significant distortions. To help initiate these crystallized beings, the pyramids were used partially as a type of sensory deprivation to help induce cosmic consciousness experiences and Kundalini Awakenings, which allowed for rapid spiritual growth. Ra explains that the pyramids are built in the sacred geometrical form of the large triangle, because this shape is very conducive to concentrating in streamings of energy. The pyramids were used to catalyze physical and spiritual healing when used in conjunction with crystals. The primary purpose for Ra teaching this to the Egyptians was because of the extremely short lifespan at the time, which wasn't enabling third-density beings to gain much from their incarnations. We know that the average lifespan in ancient Egypt was only 30 years, which is typically the age in which real spiritual growth and understanding can begin. Ra sought to alleviate this problem by teaching the Egyptians how to heal and to train healers using these pyramids. In Session 3, Ra explains how these pyramids were built by thought. You must picture the activity within all that is created. The energy is, though finite, quite large compared to the understanding of your peoples. This is an obvious point well known to your peoples, but little considered. The energy is intelligent. It is hierarchical. Much as your mind-body-spirit complex dwells within a hierarchy of vehicles and retains the intelligence of each ascendingly intelligent or balanced body, so does each atom of such a material as rock. When one can speak to that intelligence, the finite energy of the physical or chemical rock body is put into contact with that infinite power which is resident in the more well-tuned bodies, be they human or rock. With this connection made, a request may be given. The intelligence communicates to its physical vehicle, and that splitting and moving which is desired is then carried out through the displacement of the energy field of rockness from finity to a dimension which we may conveniently call simply infinity. In this way, that which is required is accomplished due to the cooperation of the infinite understanding of the Creator indwelling in the living rock. This is, of course, the mechanism by which many things are accomplished which are not subject to your present means of physical analysis of action at a distance. So, in summary, Ra states that they built the pyramids around 6,000 years ago to be instruments of physical, mental, and spiritual healing for the Egyptians. And although this might sound far-fetched to a skeptical mind, when you consider the infinity of the universe and the fact that no one has a single explanation for how this was even possible, the idea that extraterrestrials of higher intelligence could have come down and built them with thought isn't really that far-fetched at all. And Graham Hancock, who is one of the world's leading researchers in ancient civilizations, has begun to prove, with the help of other scientists, that ancient Egypt is tens of thousands of years older than modern archaeologists have assumed. And here's what Graham Hancock had to say about how the pyramids may have been built.
Different ways. Maybe they cultivated powers of the human mind that we dismiss and regard as completely unimportant. Woo-woo. These 70-ton granite beams have been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position. It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. So this begins to seem like an absurd idea, the idea that is foisted on us by archaeology. Maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, namely that psychic powers were cultivated by ancient civilizations, that they could use powers of the human mind that we have allowed to lapse, maybe that idea deserves further consideration. We have gone down a path of leverage and mechanical advantage. We're used to relying on machines. Science regards consciousness as local to the brain and doesn't see how it can exert itself outside of that. But maybe we should open up to those possibilities, that we're dealing with a very different kind of culture that used techniques that we have allowed to lapse. And maybe we could wake those techniques up again. Maybe the ability of human beings to do almost superhuman things is resident within all of us, but sleeping.